We talk of an experience economy, consumer experiences, and in the same vein, we talk about learning experientially being the best form of adult learning these days. Many companies claim to use the 70-20-10 approach to leadership development. 70% of learning they believe should be experiential, 20% relational, and 10% coursework or training. There's real value in that. But a recent survey by Gallup finds an alarming deficit in the experience piece. Very few programs can clearly define the experiences that lead to excellence in leadership. They don't individualize, they can't match a leader's experience at the time it's most needed, and they don't help leaders analyze their experiences so they can effectively apply them in the future. And so we thought it might be useful to chat about what really forms the core of adult learning and why our experience is so important, and what might really make assimilation and application of leadership really, really effective. Hi, welcome to Leadership in Shorts. And we are at Studio Zankar today. And I have with me Mr. Vasant Limay, who's a prolific writer, a human process consultant, a mountaineer, and an outbound consultant as well. He initiated and built an organization called High Places, which brought the outbound methodology to India way back in 1989. Vasant and I have worked together on various programs, and we thought this might be an interesting way to reach out to our audiences today. So we share our perspective on learning for leaders. Hello, Vasant.
Hi. Hi, Mukta. I think you talked about experiential learning and which contributes 70% or should contribute 70%. I think in adult learning, it's an important piece because adults don't really learn like children. And they do learn from their experiences, but it's not necessary that they learn the value of these experiences and really convert that into learning. You have worked on similar kind of programs and used experiential learning extensively, I would say. So would you like to share your kind of framework for experiential learning?
Yeah, so typically we would say that experiential learning is a 4-step learning process that is applied multiple times in every interaction and experience. So experience, reflect, think, and act. The cycle is so natural and organic that people engage in it without even being aware of it sometimes, without being aware that they're learning. It happens most effortlessly all the time, and it constantly transforms our lives. I'd be really interested in how do you look at experiential learning, Vasant?
I think it began for me, I started doing after my IIT days. I did work for a while, but more importantly, I was a mountaineer. And I really was looking forward to doing lots and lots of mountaineering. That's how it began. But very soon realized that a whole lot of experiences which I gathered were pretty useful. So to begin with, we started using it for children. That led me to do a diploma in outdoor education in Scotland. But very interestingly, post Second World War, these outbound experiences have been used very interestingly and wonderfully for management development. And it began with a funny incident, which was really in North Sea. Young naval cadets used to join in and get hardly any kind of training, a week or 10 days. And they were thrown into the war. Well, there was a huge casualty rate, and people were dying left, right, and center. Not because of bullet wounds or bombs and things like that, but they just couldn't handle that weather. So hypothermia was the major reason. So people started getting worried that, boss, we can't afford this kind of attrition. That was the beginning of using outbound experiences for management development. So people were put into a kind of a difficult, adventurous kind of a scenario, a bunch of people. And they will come out of it and discover a whole lot of principles which they can apply in back home realities. So really outbound programs are based on that. So we design experiences using variety of adventure activities. But as you said, the 4-step learning. So you experience something, you think about it. But that think about it is an important piece because that's where many a times it might get missed out. When people do learn from experiences. whether it is a formal training kind of a scenario or otherwise.
Yeah.
But when that particular experience gets looked at carefully
Hmm.
in a group setting where people bring in their own perspectives
Hmm.
and it gets facilitated, that's where people like us come in.
Yeah.
I think it becomes very enriching sort of an experience because people start discovering about themselves.
Hmm.
So I think one simple thing which comes to my mind that in terms of behaviors, human behavior, I think all of us act out because we want to do something good or
Hmm.
something relevant to the situation. But every action has got certain intended consequences. But alongside, there are certain unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, the so called group dynamics and a whole lot of things emerge because of these unintended consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, if you really ask me, many a times I think we know the unintended consequences, but we are not ready to accept them. In a program like this, what tends to happen is that these unintended consequences surface very easily
Hmm.
in a non threatening kind of a situation.
Hmm.
And it becomes easier for an individual to look at them objectively.
Hmm.
Because oftentimes, otherwise, people start becoming defensive.
Hmm.
They won't, no, I'm not like this.
Yes.
But when it happens over 3 exercises,
Yeah.
there is a pattern which is emerging.
Hmm.
It becomes very difficult for people to deny it,
Yeah.
which really pushes them to start reflecting. Because I think in experiential learning, the most key process for me is being able to reflect
Yes.
on your own actions. So that's really what happens during these programs. So a variety of activities happen, post activities, there are review sessions. And that's where really active learning happens, is what I would say. How much of that they apply is at the end of the day, it's really on that individual. It depends on that individual because that's the significant step to change behavior. I don't think that any experience, any learning can act like a magic wand.
Yeah.
They can't change people, but can offer them ways and means to look at it from a different perspective, to start adopting different elements which can help them to manage these unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So to me, that's really experiential learning.
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned adult learning. Yes, adults do have a very different style of absorbing and then creating an insight out of it. So we had this professor in college who used to kind of chuckle at us and say, "Oh, I hope all of you are adults." And then he used to teach us these adult learning principles. I think what I hear you saying is that this is a lot more application of what they see there. There's this preference that adults have for self-directed learning. So you don't tell me things, I will see, I will learn, I will learn from my own experience. So I think that comes in very naturally in the process that you talked about. And they also try to apply that new knowledge to real life situations. Like you said, it is up to the individual, but organizations these days are asking us, what's the learning transfer? How are you trying to transfer whatever you're saying to them? And the challenge still is, how do you really make them apply that and create shifts in the organization?
I think end of the day, as I said earlier on, that applying that learning is their own prerogative. But when they start discovering the kind of price they are paying for not applying, which many a times in these kind of review sessions comes up.
Yeah.
And when they realize that that's unaffordable, there is a initiative from individuals to bring in change. Still that point, they are not convinced.
Yeah.
They'll say yes to you, but not really transfer it or not really do something which will help them create a different kind of a model or different kind of way of dealing with same situation.
Yeah.
Because end of the day, I don't think you have a choice about teams as leaders. You're given teams.
Yeah.
And you need to make it work. And for which I think your passion, your enthusiasm, all that is important.
Yeah.
But if it is affecting people in different ways, if you're unaware of that, or if you're not going to take care of that, things don't really gel out the way you would like to.
Yeah.
So they need to look at some of these parallel processes which are happening
Yeah.
And when they start discovering that, hey, the way I'm behaving, the way I'm doing things is unaffordable,
Mm.
they're ready to bring in change,
Yeah.
and which is self-directed.
Absolutely.
That was it.
So I recall one of the programs that we were working on together. There's this deafening silence in the beginning of the program, and then I think you brought one of these methodologies. You actually got them to climb up on. There was exercise about some river
Balance.
crossing, and suddenly I saw so much of energy and enthusiasm in the participants as soon as they saw that. It's something different, something new. Do you recall that? It's just
Yeah, I think as adults we forget that there is a child in us, and given an activity, given an objective, and they know that it's a unreal situation. It's a
Mm.
uh, but you give them an objective, you throw in few rules as
Mm.
a challenge, and then they start figuring out how to do it.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is what we invite people to leave behind their uh, sort of credentials or their titles and everything outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, that doesn't happen.
Hmm.
So, a leader in the back home scenario will push himself,
Yeah.
anyways, without even realizing.
Yeah. And that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it becomes interesting because they get into the milieu of the activity, they
Hmm.
rub shoulders, they do things. It has one physical dimension, there's a bit of a uh, danger thrown in, or at least a perceived danger,
Hmm.
and which makes it very exciting.
Yeah.
They come out of it and then they're ready to talk because then they have some data right from that experience.
Hmm.
And they're not just talking to a leader, but they're talking to one of the members and who he did what he did.
Yeah.
It becomes a non-threatening situation. They're talking about some battles and plans, some river crossing.
Hmm.
So it becomes easier to feedback each other.
Yes.
And when, as facilitator,
Hmm.
when you start underlining some of these processes and invite people to look at that, hey, does it happen back home?
Hmm.
That's where actually the gates break open.
Absolutely.
Yes, it happens, this, that, etc. And then people are able to sort of relate to that far more easily
Hmm.
than sort of a concept and people reacting to a concept.
Yeah.
It comes from their experiential reality.
Yeah. In fact, it was really transformational. Some of these experiences that even I've had in sessions like this, when I was a part of the participants and not facilitating these experiences, I recall one of the experiences they generated for us through a tool called as the Visual Explorer.
Yeah, I think you have used that
I,
a
I
lot of
used that.
times. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
share
used
more
that.
about it.
Yeah, I use that extensively for this reason because it had just images where participants are kind of, we just lay those images on the floor and then they kind of look at those images, walk through those images, and kind of pick up something that they relate to, something that resonates for them. And I remember in one of those sessions, I was actually working with a bunch of entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and then they picked up. One of them picked up an image of a um, butterfly struggling through its pupa. As a butterfly, it's not a butterfly yet; it was going to become a butterfly. And then when he talked about that experience, he got into his struggle as an entrepreneur, and he talked about what he's been going through during the entire COVID era with his new business, struggling with his new business, and the kind of resilience that the person has shown over a period of time. And he just suddenly became aware of that resilience. And then he actually broke down, and then there were other people that got so inspired by that, the other entrepreneurs who had not gone through that themselves, but just watching somebody talk about that experience that they've had just through an image and just through that whole experience of being together in that process of change and transformation. So it was fascinating to even watch that as a facilitator and to relate to it. So even as facilitators, we relate to it as people, right? We're not any different.
To me, I think as a facilitator, you
Hmm.
don't work upon people.
Yeah.
You're one of them. So
Yeah.
you're working with them.
Yes.
So experiences do impact you, variety of things which are unfolding.
Yeah.
You join in that process
Yeah.
of learning together.
Hmm.
You might bring in few more insights,
Hmm.
but it's a joint experience of learning.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting for me because each program is different for that same reason.
Yeah, and there's this emotive component which is very active in
Yeah.
some of these exercises. Even when you do your outbound kind of experiences, people get excited, thrilled. Some of them feel dejected, sometimes disappointed. So there's this whole emotional.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting elements you talked about in visual, what is it
in
called?
the Visual Explorer, yeah.
Visual Explorer. I think so many of these experiences act in a similar way.
Hmm.
For example, rappelling.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there, I've been instructed, I've been explained everything.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, I have to sort of, without looking back, I have to rely on that rope and the system
Hmm.
and go down 40 feet or 70 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
I think a whole lot of things happen to you. It's
Hmm.
something like that picture.
Yes.
Unleashing whole lot of memories, whole lot of processes.
Hmm.
And especially when people talk about that in the session,
Hmm.
I think there is a commonality of experience.
Yeah.
That's one. But there are a whole lot of perspectives which each one of them has picked up differentially,
Hmm.
which in many ways to me enriches every individual in that group.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of group learning
Yeah.
or group process.
Hmm. So, Vasant, you led the Himalayan base camp, and there must be fascinating experiences from there. Why don't you share some of the nuggets with us?
Yeah, I think I've led at least a dozen expeditions to different peaks in Himalayas.
Hmm.
I think what fascinates me is a dichotomy of a process which is very interesting. That as any member, and not just the leader, I think there is one process which is alive that at any cost, I want to be on the summit.
Hmm.
There's another piece which is at any cost, I want the expedition to be successful. In Himalayan expeditions, even if one member reaches the top, the expedition is successful.
Yeah.
So now, if you look at these two streams, they're paradoxical. How can they coexist?
Hmm.
And one is very selfish, that I want to be on the summit at any cost.
Yeah.
And I would do anything for the team to be successful.
Yeah.
So these are two parallel, that's the dichotomy that I'm talking about. And
Hmm.
if you apply it in back home scenarios and corporate scenarios, a manager and a leader and a whole lot of things, I think he's riding the same kind of scenario.
Hmm.
That they want to be successful as a team, but he wants kind of star performers.
Yeah.
At any cost, he wants them to be successful.
Yes.
Because for a Himalayan expedition, both are required.
Hmm.
But if you just have a fantastic team, that doesn't help. You need some people whom we call as the summit material.
Yeah. Okay.
So end of the day, that final piece, they have to push themselves to the summit.
Yeah.
You need that kind of drive,
Hmm.
and which can be at one level very competitive.
Yeah.
So I think in sort of business scenarios, both these elements are alive.
Yeah.
And you need to, as leaders, you need to be able to hold them together
Yeah.
and nurture them together.
Yeah.
So that's one very interesting sort of takeaway for me
Hmm.
from mountaineering, and which in different ways and means I've been able to apply.
Hmm.
I think what really makes leaders different
Hmm.
is really they can dream.
Yeah.
All of us dream.
Yeah.
But they're the people who can dream and bring those dreams into reality. But for
Hmm.
which they need teams.
Yeah.
They can't do it by themselves.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very interesting kind of a scenario or a situation
Hmm.
where they need to sell their dream. They need to get people to buy into their dream
Hmm.
and then work together to achieve that dream. But I think leaders are the people who can dream and bring them into reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the stark difference, really. And that's what we develop people for, to create those realities for them. Though, I was earlier talking about transferring that learning, and then I said, how might we be able to help people consolidate some of these
Yeah.
experiences, comprehend them, and create insight for themselves, and
You
see
talked
where they
something about journals and
yeah. I was coming to that. Even in our last episode, I was talking about how do you really make them document what they have done, and what are the insights, what are the shifts, what is it that they have really gone through that transformative experience, what have they got from it. And so I also make journaling a part of some of my sessions, particularly the experiential ones, because every day when you kind of think back, reflect, and you use the word reflection because the most important word really for leaders. Reflect back every evening and say, what I have gone through and what is it that I have really got from it? What is the meaning that I'm making from there? So we created even a journal for people, saying, giving them evocative questions. Think about what have you gone through, how have you dealt with an uncomfortable emotion, for example, when you were at the top of the mountain and you're trying to look down, what happened to you. So some of those things, and it has been immensely helpful for some of them to document those shifts, and their organizations have actually, they have applauded this effort. And I'm hoping more people start using journaling as their method. So yeah, thank you for being with us here today, Vasant, and sharing your experiences with us. I'm sure our audiences will feel enriched by that. So signing off for today at Leadership in Shorts. We'll see you again in July.